income stream in retirement, not just the account balance. Do you think giving workers that kind of information would, number one, encourage retirement savings? And what if that were paired with an estimate of how much a person would need in retirement? In other words, here's how much you would need in retirement, and here's what your income stream would be. Do you think that might encourage people maybe to set aside a little bit more if they were able to?
Senator Harkin, that's an excellent question, and I'm afraid my answer is going to be more complicated than a simple yes or no, if you don't mind. This is something we've studied for many, many years at the Employee Benefit Research Institute. We have a 2006 issue brief just trying to estimate what people actually do need to have a comfortable retirement. The problem I would see of trying to do something that's just a boilerplate regulation or legislation is that there are so many complications in trying to figure out what is an adequate retirement target. It depends on whether or not you have any sort of annuity. It depends on whether you have any sort of long-term care. It depends on a number of different things. And just to quickly emphasize one thing is that you can do all the simulation modeling you want and come out with here is the average value. You have to keep in mind that if you shoot for a target that's based on averages, you're in essence telling people one chance out of two you're not going to have sufficient money, either because you lived too long or because you had catastrophic health care costs or what have you. So if someone were trying to approach something like that, my professional opinion would be you can't just have a number. You absolutely have to have a range of numbers to try to guide them along to their particular comfort level, and you have to reflect their particular characteristics. I personally think it might be a bit misleading, more than a bit misleading, to just come out with any rule of thumb and try to apply it across the board.
That's really hard for people, for the average person, to sift through all those numbers, sift through all that and say, yeah, here's what I need. Look, I have a law degree. My wife has a law degree. We make good money. We're in the upper ranges there. So we went to think about our retirement and went to a retirement counselor, and she gave us all these things. I don't even understand it. I said, well, what do you think? What do you think is best for us? Well, here's what I think. Okay, fine, we'll do that. I got to believe that's what most people do. They can't understand all this gobbledygook, you know, the average worker out there. So they tend to take whatever is presented to them and suggested to them. So how do you get it in a form so that they really do understand? If you don't have, here's what your income stream can be, and here's how much you need. Here, based upon where you are now, assuming you, if you're disabled now, here's what you need. If you're not disabled, if you don't become disabled, here's what you need to project what you need, and here's your income stream. Then people would have a pretty good idea of that, wouldn't they?
If one were to simplify the target to a place where one could do ready comparisons between the projected annuity value coming from a defined contribution plan, plus their Social Security, plus their additional savings, plus if they had a defined benefit or a cash balance situation, and combine all that information together, again, one could come up with a relatively easy comparison. My extreme caution would be if you're going to develop that target based on nothing but average life expectancy, average investment experience, average health care costs in retirement, you are in essence dooming them to a 50% chance of running out of money in retirement. So if you're going to proceed down that route, one needs to be conservative in those assumptions.
Right.
One needs to realize life expectancy is going to be relevant only for 50% of the population. One needs to get a target that they will be able to focus on and have some degree of certainty that that would be sufficient for them.
Well, I'm trying to get a better handle on this, and also this whole shift to the 401ks. But the other thing I wanted to ask you was, I'll pursue that later because I want to ask, my time is out. I have a lot of questions for Ross and Ms. Miller, but I'll turn to Senator Sanders. We'll go back and forth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for your excellent testimony. Mr. Eisenbright, let me briefly run through some economic history of the last couple of years. A couple of years ago, as a result of the greed and illegal behavior on Wall Street, this country has been plunged into a horrendous recession. Congress, in its wisdom, against my vote, decided to bail out Wall Street to the tune of $700 billion. Number two, despite growing income and wealth inequality in America, what we have done in recent years is lower taxes for the very rich. Warren Buffett, you know, Mr. Chairman, often comments that he, one of the richest people in the world, pays an effective tax rate lower than his secretary, effective tax rate. And right now we have some of our colleagues who want to give $700 billion in tax breaks to the top 2%. And want to repeal the estate tax, which would provide $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 0.3%. And now, in the midst of all of that, we have folks like Pete Peterson of the Peterson Foundation. And you say in your remarks, you say, and I quote, "The Peterson Foundation and a host of other mostly well-off experts have managed to convince much of the media and many Washington policymakers that the way to save Social Security benefits is to cut them." End of quote. Would you want to comment on a billionaire who made his money in Wall Street now suggesting spending a huge sum of money to convince the American people that the way to save Social Security is to cut benefits?
Yes, there's so much to say about that.
And so little time.
You know, the average person, the secretary, Warren Buffett's secretary, if she's making a good income, might be paying 35% on her salary, whereas someone like Pete Peterson with, you know, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars in capital investments is paying 20%, 15% on his capital gains and the dividends. And when confronted with the possibility of helping out the deficit by supporting the carried interest, ending the carried interest exemption, which taxes private equity managers at a capital gains rate instead of at ordinary income rate, chose to oppose the repeal of that exemption. So his concern about the federal deficit is a very narrow one, and it seems to be focused on people who have very little and what they can contribute to closing the deficit. As I think you said earlier, Social Security does not contribute to the deficit. The law prohibits Social Security from borrowing. So if we did nothing and the trust fund actually were depleted, as predicted in 2037 or 2039, it would even then not contribute to the deficit. The benefits would be automatically cut.
Let me ask you this. Why are our good friends on Wall Street so interested in seeing Social Security privatized or dismantled?
Well, they've always opposed Social Security since its inception, and part of it is that if there weren't Social Security, people would have to save through 401k-like instruments which give them a fee. It's a business choice for them, and they'd like to see their business expanded.
Thank you very much. Ms. Miller, thank you very much for being here today, and I want you to know, as Senator Harkin indicated, you are speaking, your experience is the experience of many, many millions of people who, sadly enough, don't have their experiences really reflected here on Capitol Hill. There are those, as I think you have heard, who suggest that you should be perhaps working to the age of 70. And many of those guys sit behind a desk and make whole lots of money. They think it's a great idea that you work until the age of 70, and that people who are involved in construction, people who are on their feet every day, people who are doing physically demanding work as you are, should work to the age of 70. What do you think?
Well, I would work until I'm 70 because I'm going to have to. If my body doesn't give out, you know, I'll be fine. But that's a hope. I'm lifting a 100-pound person, you know. In and out of bathtubs, it's very hard work. They can work till they're 70 because they're sitting behind a desk, as you've said. They're not out physically being labored. And if I was sitting behind a desk, I would have no problem to work till I'm 80, as my mother-in-law is 80, and
You
she
can run
has
for
a
the
great
United States
warm
Senate,
mind.
you'll be one of the younger members. You say, yeah.
Well, that would be great. You know, my grandson would have somebody to be really proud of, wouldn't he? But like my mother-in-law is 80, and I was saying in the elevator up here, I wish I can be, when I turn 80, I want to be as sound mind and body as she is. You know, she's very lucky. But if I continue working like this, I'll never make it to 70 in an employment.
Well, let me ask you this also. Let's just assume one is 68 years old doing your type of work. I mean, the truth of the matter is many employers would prefer somebody who's 25 years of age who will work for a lower wage, right? Maybe have more strength. What happens if you're 68 and somebody says, well, I'm sorry, I can't hire you anymore? You think it'll be a whole lot of good job opportunities for 68-year-old people out there?
No, there's not even good opportunities out for a 43-year-old like myself.
Right.
I mean, when I came back into the job market after 10 years on a job in the construction field, I was a bookkeeper. I was making good money. I thought I was high on the hog, actually, then. I was making over double what I'm making now. But I went to find a job, and I was semi-skilled. I can do bookkeeping and all that. I couldn't find a job. That's what they wanted. They wanted young kids, and I was in my 40s already.
And they want young people often in physical demanding jobs, younger people are stronger.
They are.
Also, in other types of work, younger people are going to work for lower wages than older workers are. So I'm not sure, Mr. Chairman, what world people are living in when they think, hey, you're 68, 69, you can go out and get a job. You don't need Social Security. It's really quite incomprehensible to me. Thank you very much, Ms. Miller.
Thank you.
And the whole panel.
Well, Senator Sanders, just to follow up on that, I was reading Mr. Eisenberg's testimony, and on page 6, he said that yet the Peterson Foundation and a host of other mostly well-off experts have managed to convince much of the media and many Washington policymakers that the way to save Social Security benefits is to cut them. Despite what we have heard from your former colleague, Alan Simpson, the average Social Security recipient isn't living in a gated community. Now, there you go. I think that sort of puts your finger on it. I mean, I like Alan Simpson. He's a fine man. But I know a lot of retired senators who have left here, either been defeated or voluntarily retired. And that's who they associate with, people kind of who live in gated communities. They're upper income people. They're not living in gated communities, but they're upper income. They're not associating with Ms. Miller and the families that make $40,000 and $50,000 and $60,000 a year. They're associating with people like us, making $200,000 and more dollars per year. That's who they associate with. So you automatically think, well, gee, I know all these elderly people, and they got the condo in Miami, and then they got someplace else up north for the summer, and they got a gated community. That's who Alan Simpson's thinking about. But that's not the bulk of Americans who are out there. That's just the very thin veneer at the top. The average benefit, as you pointed out, is about $14,000 for Social Security. I doubt that anybody on that is going to be living in a gated community. So again, we have to get back to just who we're talking about here. Who are we talking about? And what are we talking, who are we talking about? Mr. Eisenberg, you said also, unfortunately, we're already weakening this foundational retirement system, some proposing further cuts, taking into account the increase in the normal retirement age from 65 to 67, which we're doing right now, based upon the 1982 or 83 bill, as well as Medicare deductions and income taxes paid and benefits. The net replacement rate for the average earner retiring at 65 is already scheduled to drop from 39% to 28% in 2 decades. So the replacement rate at 65 was 39. You say by raising the average age to 67, that replacement rate will drop to 28. What will it drop to? I don't find it here. What will it drop to if you raise it to 70? Do you know, or Mr. Vanderhee? I don't know. Either one of you know that?
It's another 13%. No, to 70 is a 19.5% additional cut in benefits. So the